The wind carries salt and secrets along the jagged coastline of Seabrook, where Elena Marshall stands at the cliff's edge. Her chestnut hair whips across her face, obscuring tears that have become as familiar as breathing. In her hands, a leather-bound journal flutters open, pages filled with the kind of truth that cuts deeper than the rocks below. 3 months ago, Elena believed she knew what heartbreak was. She was wrong. Have you ever noticed how betrayal arrives in the most ordinary moments? Not with dramatic confrontations or tearful confessions, but in the quiet spaces we take for granted. For Elena, it came on a Tuesday evening. Rain tapping against windows. Tea cooling on the nightstand. The soft ping of her husband's phone while he showered, a sound so commonplace she almost ignored it. Almost. The message preview glowed in the dim light. Last night was incredible. I miss your hands already. Can't wait until next week when he's at the conference. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of supporting Daniel through law school, of postponed dreams and patient love. 12 years reduced to a single text message not meant for her eyes. When Daniel emerged from the shower, towel around his waist and practiced smile in place, he found Elena sitting motionless, his phone in her trembling hands. The look that passed between them said everything: his guilt, her devastation, and the unspoken acknowledgement that some things, once broken, can never be repaired. 2 weeks later, Elena packed a single suitcase and rented a cottage in Seabrook, a coastal town where no one knew her name or the hollow space where her heart used to be. She came to disappear, to become as invisible as she had felt in the final years of her marriage. What she didn't expect was to find herself instead. Or to meet Noah Whitaker, a man carrying his own invisible wounds, wounds inflicted by the same betrayal from the opposite side. Sometimes the universe has a cruel sense of humor. Other times, perhaps it's offering a second chance disguised as coincidence. This is a story about two people who lost everything they thought mattered, only to discover what truly does. It's about the wreckage we salvage and the beauty we build from broken pieces. About how sometimes you have to lose your way completely before finding where you belong. Have you ever felt like your entire life was built on a lie? Like everything you believed to be true suddenly wasn't? If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the light someone else needs to find their way forward. As Elena closes her journal and turns from the cliff edge, she doesn't yet know that her greatest love story isn't ending, it's just beginning to unfold. Before we begin, this is love from my heart to you. Or maybe, just a small love letter to say thank you. Once upon a time, this channel fell in love. Not with fairy tales, but with the people who believe in them. The ones who cry during the quiet parts. Who pause to feel a heartbeat between the lines. Who still believe that love, even complicated, flawed, impossible love, can be real. Love Enchanted was created for you. The romantic. The hopeful. The heart that's been broken and still dares to open again. So if you're here, you're not just watching a story. You're part of one. Stay with us, for stories that ache, heal, and remind us why love is always worth the risk. Seabrook welcomed Elena with indifference, exactly what she needed. The coastal town existed in perpetual autumn, all muted colors and weathered edges, even in spring. Her rented cottage sat on the northern bluff, a small weatherboard structure with peeling blue paint and windows that rattled against the constant sea breeze. It was nothing like the meticulously designed Boston brownstone she had shared with Daniel. Nothing to remind her of the life she was leaving behind. The cottage came furnished with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with forgotten paperbacks, previous tenants' discards that now became Elena's companions. She arranged her few belongings with deliberate care, books stacked by her bedside, her grandmother's quilt draped across the sofa, her laptop set up on the rickety dining table that would serve as her desk for the foreseeable future. The university had been surprisingly accommodating when she requested an extended sabbatical. 10 years of dedicated teaching, published papers, and glowing student evaluations had earned her this reprieve. "Take the time you need, Professor Marshall," her department chair had said, concern evident in her eyes. "Your Introduction to American Literature course can be taught online, if you're willing." Elena was willing. Teaching anchored her when everything else felt adrift. For 3 hours each week, she could lose herself in Whitman's contradictions and Dickinson's precision, in Fitzgerald's disillusionment and Morrison's haunting truths. Literature had always been her refuge, now it became her lifeline. The rest of her days stretched before her, empty and daunting. She established routines to fill the silence. Morning walks along the shoreline, afternoons reading on the porch, evenings grading papers and planning lectures. She spoke only when necessary, to the grocery clerk, to the librarian, to her students through the computer screen. Words had become precious, rationed carefully like wartime supplies. At night, memories ambushed her with cruel precision. Daniel's law firm promotion dinner 3 years ago, the night she now realized everything had changed. She had worn the blue dress he liked, had made small talk with partners' wives, had pretended not to notice how his eyes followed his assistant throughout the evening. Julia Whittaker, interior designer, copper-haired, laughing at his jokes with practiced admiration. Elena had dismissed the unease settling in her stomach as insecurity. After all, Daniel had chosen her, married her, built a life with her. But had he? Looking back, Elena could trace the gradual erosion of their marriage. Cancelled anniversary dinners, weekend work emergencies, the growing physical distance between them in their king-sized bed. The clues had been there, scattered like breadcrumbs, but she had refused to follow their trail. "Your greatest flaw is your loyalty," her mother once told her. "You see the best in people long after they've shown you their worst." The morning after discovering the text message, Elena had confronted Daniel in their kitchen. The granite countertops gleamed under recessed lighting, everything polished and perfect, just as they had appeared to the outside world. "How long?" she had asked, voice steady despite the earthquake beneath her ribs. Daniel's hesitation told her everything before he spoke. "Elena, it's complicated." "How long?" "3 years. His confession hung between them. It wasn't planned. It just happened. 3 years. 1,095 days of lies. Of coming home to her, sharing meals with her, making plans for a future he was simultaneously destroying. "Do you love her?" The question escaped before she could swallow it back. His silence was answer enough. 2 weeks later, she was gone. The Harbor Cafe became Elena's first tentative connection to Seabrook. Nestled at the edge of the boardwalk, its weathered blue exterior and fogged windows offered anonymity and comfort in equal measure. The coffee was strong, the chowder hearty, and most importantly, no one asked why she always came alone. She claimed the corner table by the window, the one with the unobstructed view of the bay. Maggie, the silver-haired waitress with kind eyes and efficient movements, quickly learned her order: black coffee and whatever soup was warming on the stove. "Clam chowder today," Maggie announced on a particularly gray Tuesday, setting down the steaming mug. "And you've got company at your table if that's all right. We're packed with the conservation volunteers." Before Elena could respond, a tall figure approached, carrying a cup and a dog-eared paperback. "Mind if I join you?" His voice was low, graveled at the edges like he didn't use it often. Elena gestured to the empty chair. "It's all yours." He sat without another word, opening his book, Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, while Elena returned to grading papers. The silence between them was comfortable, unusual for strangers. An hour passed before either spoke again. "You're new here," he said, not looking up from his book. "Is it that obvious? Small town. Everyone knows everyone." He finally met her eyes. His were the color of the sea after a storm, gray-blue and impossibly deep. "Noah Whittaker." "Elena Marshall." He nodded, then returned to his book. Elena found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the slight crease between his brows, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. His hands were calloused, artist's hands, not unlike her father's had been. When he finally closed his book and stood to leave, he paused. "Funny thing about betrayal," he said, staring at the tide rolling in. "It makes silence feel like a friend." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Elena with the unsettling feeling that he had somehow read the grief she'd been carrying like a second skin. Noah Whittaker had not always been a man of few words. Once, he had presented architectural designs to boardrooms full of investors, had charmed clients with his vision and passion, had built a reputation as one of Boston's most promising young architects. His firm specialized in sustainable design, buildings that worked with nature rather than against it. His marriage to Julia had seemed equally harmonious, a partnership of complementary talents and shared ambitions. Until it wasn't. Now, he volunteered 3 days a week at Seabrook's Sea Turtle Sanctuary, spent his evenings sculpting driftwood in his workshop, and spoke only when necessary. The locals knew pieces of his story: the successful architect who walked away from his career, the man whose wife had left him for someone else, but they respected his privacy, his need for space and silence. What they didn't know was how completely he had reinvented himself from the wreckage of his former life. How he collected broken pieces of driftwood from the shore, seeing potential where others saw debris. How he transformed them into sculptures that captured movement and emotion, birds in flight, hands reaching, bodies curving toward one another. Even wreckage has a second life, he often murmured to himself as he worked, sandpaper smoothing rough edges into something that might one day be beautiful. They fell into a rhythm after that first meeting. 3 days a week, they shared the corner table at Harbor Cafe. Sometimes they spoke, brief exchanges about the weather, the book he was reading, the papers she was grading. More often, they simply existed in the same space, 2 planets in quiet orbit. Elena learned that Noah volunteered at the Sea Turtle Sanctuary, that he had once been an architect with a prestigious firm in Boston, that he collected sea glass and left it in small piles along the boardwalk for children to find. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was how their lives had already intersected in the most painful of ways. There was comfort in their shared silence, a recognition that some wounds need air and time before they can be spoken aloud. Elena found herself looking forward to these cafe meetings, to the quiet companionship of someone who didn't expect her to be okay, who understood that healing wasn't linear or predictable. One afternoon, as rain lashed against the cafe windows, Noah spoke more than usual. "I build things," he said, tracing a pattern in the condensation on his mug. "Or I used to. Now I mostly rebuild them." "What changed?" Elena asked. "Everything." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw a reflection of her own loss. "Sometimes you have to tear everything down to see what's worth saving." Elena nodded, understanding more than he realized. In the aftermath of Daniel's betrayal, she too was sorting through the rubble, determining what to salvage and what to leave behind. They were both learning the language of grief, the dialect of betrayal. Both discovering that sometimes the deepest connections form not through shared joy but through mutual understanding of pain. In a world that demanded recovery and closure, they gave each other permission to simply exist in the broken places. And in that shared solitude, something fragile began to take root. Not quite friendship, not quite more, but a recognition that perhaps they were not as alone as they had believed. April arrived in Seabrook with tentative warmth, coaxing wildflowers from the coastal bluffs and drawing fishing boats back to the harbor. Elena found herself settling into the rhythm of small-town life, no longer a visitor but not quite a local. Her online students submitted their midterm papers on American Romanticism, and she graded them on her porch, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt against the lingering chill. Her meetings with Noah at Harbor Cafe evolved from coincidence to unspoken arrangement. Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 2 o'clock, they would share the corner table, sometimes for hours, sometimes just long enough for a cup of coffee and a nod of acknowledgement. Their conversations remained sparse but gradually deepened, like water slowly filling a well. "Why literature?" Noah asked one afternoon, closing his book, Steinbeck this time. Elena considered the question, tracing the rim of her mug. "Words were my first love. The way they can build worlds, bridge understanding, preserve moments that would otherwise be lost." She smiled faintly. "My father used to say I was born with ink in my veins instead of blood." "He sounds like a wise man." He was. He taught high school English for 40 years. Died still believing that the right book at the right time could save a life. Noah nodded. "My grandfather was a carpenter. Said the same thing about wood, that it remembers every hand that touches it, holds stories in its grain." "Is that why you sculpt?" Elena asked, venturing into territory they hadn't explored. Something shifted in Noah's expression, a door opening slightly. "Partly. Would you like to see sometime?" The invitation hung between them, significant in its ordinariness. A step beyond the neutral territory of the cafe into something more personal. "I'd like that," Elena replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Noah's cottage sat on the southern edge of town, a modest structure with large windows facing the water and a converted boathouse that served as his workshop. Elena arrived on a Sunday afternoon, carrying a bottle of wine and unexpected nervousness. This was the first social invitation she had accepted since arriving in Seabrook, the first time she had willingly stepped into someone else's space. The main house was sparsely furnished but warm, with shelves lined with books and small driftwood pieces scattered throughout like three-dimensional punctuation marks. A large sketch of the town's lighthouse hung above the fireplace, the lines precise and architectural, revealing the man Noah had once been. "You drew this?" Elena asked, studying the detailed rendering. "Old habits," Noah replied with a half-smile. "The town's trying to restore the lighthouse. I've been helping with the plans." He led her through the back door to the workshop, and Elena felt something shift as they crossed the threshold. This space was alive in a way the house wasn't. Tools arranged with care on pegboards, wood in various stages of transformation scattered across workbenches, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and possibility. Natural light poured through skylights, illuminating dozens of sculptures throughout the room. Some were small enough to hold in one hand, others stood taller than Elena herself. All captured movement in static form. A bird with wings outstretched, a woman with her face tilted toward an invisible sun, two hands almost but not quite touching. "Noah," Elena breathed, moving slowly among the pieces. "These are extraordinary." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise but pleased by her reaction. "Just broken things trying to be something else." Elena stopped before a piece that drew her eye, curved forms intertwining, supporting each other. "What's this one called?" "After the Storm," he said quietly. "It's not finished yet." She nodded, understanding instinctively. None of them were finished. The sculptures, Noah, herself. All works in progress, becoming something new from what remained. He showed her his process, how he collected wood from the beach after storms, how he studied each piece to discover what it might become, how he worked with the natural grain and imperfections rather than against them. "The damage is part of the story," he explained, running his fingers along a crack in a half-finished piece. "I could fill it, sand it away, but then something essential would be lost." Elena thought of her own damage, the cracks and fissures that Daniel's betrayal had left in her. She had been trying to smooth them away, to present an unbroken surface to the world. Perhaps there was another way. "Would you like some wine?" Noah asked, gesturing toward the house. "I can show you the lighthouse plans. They're on my desk." It happened on a Tuesday, nearly 2 months after their first meeting. Elena had been invited to Noah's home a handful of times by then, each visit revealing another layer of the man beneath the quiet exterior. She had learned that he preferred classical music while working, that he could name every constellation in the night sky, that he left Boston not just because of his divorce but because the city itself had become a map of memories he couldn't bear to navigate. While Noah stepped outside to take a call from the sanctuary, Elena wandered to his desk, drawn to a stack of sketches, architectural drawings of what appeared to be renovations for the old lighthouse. Beneath them was a newspaper, folded open to a society page. And there, smiling up at her, was Daniel. Her Daniel, with his arm around a striking woman with copper hair. The caption read, "Attorney Daniel Marshall and interior designer Julia Whittaker at the Children's Hospital Benefit." The room tilted beneath Elena's feet. Julia Whittaker, Noah's ex-wife. The woman Daniel had betrayed her with. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Noah's comment about betrayal the first day they met, his understanding of her grief, the coincidence of them both ending up in the same small coastal town. The teacup slipped from Elena's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor just as Noah returned. He found her there, staring at the newspaper, tea soaking into the floorboards. "You knew," she whispered, her voice hollow. "All this time, You knew who I was. He didn't deny it. I saw your name on the cottage rental agreement when you first arrived. The property manager is a friend. And you didn't say anything? You just, what? Wanted to see the train wreck up close. No. His voice was firm. I knew what it felt like to find peace. I didn't want to lose mine, or take yours away. Elena backed toward the door, shaking her head. I can't do this. I can't. She fled, leaving Noah standing amid broken ceramic and spilled tea, the newspaper between them like an open wound. For 3 weeks, Elena avoided the harbor cafe. She avoided the boardwalk, the beach, anywhere she might encounter Noah. She threw herself into her online teaching, into long walks along the cliffs, into filling her journal with words that burned on the page. April 18th. Is this some cosmic joke? Of all the people in all the world, I find connection with the one person who understands my pain because he lived it from the other side. Daniel and Julia. Julia and Noah. Noah and me. We're all connected by lies and betrayal, a twisted web none of us chose. But I can't stop thinking about him. About the way he looked at me that day. Not with pity, but with recognition. Like he was seeing himself reflected back. The betrayal felt fresh again, but different this time. Not just Daniel's infidelity, but the universe's cruel symmetry in bringing her to this place, to this man. She replayed every conversation with Noah, searching for hints he might have dropped, clues she should have caught. Had he been laughing at her all along? Comparing notes on their shared heartbreak? No. The Noah she had come to know wasn't capable of such cruelty. He had kept the truth from her, yes, but perhaps with the same protective instinct that had led her to Seabrook in the first place, the desire to start fresh, unburdened by the past. Still, the connection between them now felt tainted, complicated by their unwitting roles in each other's pain. How could they possibly move forward from here? One evening, as rain lashed against her cottage windows, Elena pulled out her phone and found herself scrolling through old photos, evidence of the life she had left behind. Daniel at a faculty dinner, smiling with practiced charm. Their anniversary trip to Napa Valley 3 years ago, just before everything changed. Had he been seeing Julia even then? Had he been comparing Elena to her, finding her wanting? The questions circled like vultures, picking at wounds she thought had begun to heal. She deleted the photos one by one, a digital exorcism that left her feeling hollow but somehow lighter. Later that night, she wrote in her journal, I came here to disappear. Instead, I keep finding pieces of myself washed up on shore, fragments I thought were lost forever. Is that healing or just another form of pain? Noah understands what it's like to be replaced, discarded. To question every memory, wondering if it was real or just skillfully performed. No one else in my life can truly comprehend that specific agony. But how do we separate our connection from the betrayal that made it possible? Is anything built on such a foundation doomed to collapse? The storm outside intensified, mirroring the turmoil within. Elena stood at her window, watching lightning illuminate the churning sea. Somewhere in Seabrook, Noah was weathering the same storm. Was he thinking of her too? Wondering if they could salvage something from this wreckage? Or was he, like her, realizing that sometimes the past cannot be outrun, only confronted? Would you be able to form a connection with someone linked to your past heartbreak? Could you separate the person from the pain they remind you of? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever found healing in the most unexpected places? As thunder shook the cottage foundations, Elena made a decision. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting Daniel and Julia continue to dictate her choices even in their absence. Tomorrow, she would face Noah, and whatever complicated truth lay between them, head on. After all, they were both experts in rebuilding from wreckage now. The storm that hit Seabrook that night was unexpected in its ferocity. Weather reports had predicted rain, but not the gale force winds that bent trees horizontal and sent debris skittering down empty streets. By midnight, the power grid surrendered, plunging the town into darkness save for the intermittent flash of lightning illuminating the angry sea. Elena stood at her cottage window, watching nature's fury with a strange sense of kinship. The storm outside matched the one within, raw, uncontainable, demanding to be acknowledged. 3 weeks of avoiding Noah, of pretending their connection hadn't mattered, of trying to hate him for his association with her pain, all of it suddenly seemed exhausting and pointless. When the power went out, something inside her finally broke. She was tired of hiding. Tired of feeling like a ghost in her own life. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. She would go to him now, in the middle of this storm, when pretense was impossible and truth was the only shelter. She grabbed her raincoat and keys, hesitated only briefly before adding her journal to her bag. If they were going to confront this, she would hold nothing back. The drive to Noah's cottage was treacherous. Rain hammered against her windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, and twice she had to swerve to avoid fallen branches. The rational part of her brain questioned her sanity, driving through a coastal storm for a man connected to her greatest heartbreak, but rationality had long since taken a back seat to something more primal. The need to be seen, to be understood, to stop running from pain and start moving through it. Noah's cottage appeared through the rain like a mirage, windows glowing with the warm light of candles or lanterns. Elena parked haphazardly and ran to his door, soaked through before she'd gone 3 steps. Her knock was lost in a clap of thunder, so she knocked again, harder, more insistent. When he opened the door, surprise and concern etched across his features. She didn't give him time to speak. "I'm tired of feeling like a ghost," she said, echoing her thoughts. "I'm tired of letting them take anything else from us." Noah stepped aside, letting her in from the storm. In the flickering candlelight, he looked both stronger and more vulnerable than she remembered. "I should have told you sooner," he said, taking her dripping coat. "I just didn't know how. Would it have changed anything? We were both betrayed by the people we loved most. That's not something you casually mention over coffee." He handed her a towel for her hair, his movements careful, as if she might bolt at any moment. "I thought about telling you 100 times, but then you'd smile or make some observation about Hemingway, and I'd think, why ruin this? Why bring them into this space we've created?" Elena understood completely. Their cafe meetings, his workshop, her porch, these had become sanctuaries from the past, places where they existed only as themselves, not as victims of the same betrayal. "I kept waiting for it to matter less," she admitted. "For the connection between us to outweigh the connection to them. But when I saw that photo, everything collapsed," Noah finished. The past and present collided. He led her to his workshop, where candles illuminated the driftwood sculptures in dancing shadows. One piece in particular caught her eye, 2 curved forms intertwining, supporting each other. The one he'd called After the Storm. "They were wrecked," Noah said, following her gaze. "But not ruined. You and me, we're not ruined either, Elena." When he touched her face, his fingers were gentle, as if she might break. Or perhaps as if he might. Their kiss was tentative at first, the kiss of 2 people remembering how to feel warmth after a long winter. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered against his lips. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I'd like to try." Outside, the storm raged on, but within the workshop's walls, something fragile and new took root, a connection forged not despite their shared pain, but because of it. A recognition that perhaps they were uniquely qualified to understand each other, precisely because of the broken paths that had led them here. Spring unfurled across Seabrook in a riot of color and renewal. Wildflowers carpeted the bluffs, fishing boats dotted the harbor from dawn till dusk, and tourists began trickling back to the boardwalk shops and cafes. Elena and Noah moved cautiously into whatever was growing between them. Cooking dinner together, walking along the beach at dawn, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. They spoke of their pasts in small doses, each revelation a stone laid in the foundation they were building. The process was sometimes painful but always illuminating, like lancing a wound to allow proper healing. "Julia never understood why I left the firm," Noah told her one evening as they sat on his porch. "She wanted the lifestyle, the parties, the recognition. When I walked away to do conservation work, something broke between us." Daniel was the opposite, Elena replied. He was so focused on climbing higher that he stopped seeing what was beside him. I was just furniture. Something that had always been there and always would be. You're not furniture, Elena. You're the whole damn house. She laughed, the sound still new enough to surprise her. Is that an architect's attempt at romance? Is it working? She kissed him in answer. Their relationship developed in tandem with their individual healing, each supporting the other while maintaining the space needed for personal growth. Elena began writing again, not just in her journal but poetry that she tentatively shared with Noah. He, in turn, showed her his designs for the lighthouse restoration and the evolution of his sculptures. One rainy afternoon, Elena sat cross-legged on the floor of Noah's workshop, reading from her journal while he worked on a new piece. April 30th. I'm learning that healing isn't linear. It's more like the tide, sometimes advancing, sometimes retreating, but always in motion. The pain doesn't disappear. It transforms. Becomes something I carry differently. Noah nodded without looking up from his work. That's what I try to show in these pieces. Not the absence of damage, but its integration into something new. Elena watched his hands move over the wood, strong, capable hands that built beauty from brokenness. Hands that held her with a tenderness that still surprised her. Read me another, he said. She flipped through pages, finding an entry from earlier that week. The irony isn't lost on me, that the man who helps me heal is connected to the one who caused my wounds. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps we're meant to find wholeness in the most unexpected places, with the most unexpected people. Noah set down his tools and crossed to where she sat, kneeling before her. I think about that too. How strange and perfect it is that we found each other. Do you believe in fate? Elena asked. I believe in patterns, he replied. In design. In things that appear random but actually follow an underlying structure we can't always see. The architect's view of destiny. Something like that. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I also believe we get to choose which patterns we continue and which ones we break. They were breaking patterns together. The cycle of distrust, the habit of isolation, the tendency to define themselves by their losses rather than their potential. Each day brought new challenges, moments when the past threatened to overshadow the present, but they faced them together with growing confidence. May brought warmer days and the annual Sea Turtle Festival, where Noah volunteered at educational booths while Elena explored the town's celebration. She found herself chatting with locals who no longer treated her as a tourist but as a semi-permanent fixture in their community, and in Noah's life. He's different with you, Maggie from the cafe told her as they watched Noah demonstrate turtle conservation techniques to a group of children. More present. Before you came along, he was here but not really here, if you know what I mean. Elena understood perfectly. She had existed the same way after Daniel's betrayal, physically present but emotionally absent, going through the motions of living without actually engaging with life. That evening, they walked along the moonlit beach, collecting pieces of sea glass and driftwood that caught their eye. I have something for you, Noah said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small driftwood carving, a tiny lighthouse no bigger than her palm, intricately detailed. It's beautiful, Elena said, turning it over in her hands. Lighthouses were originally built to warn ships away from dangerous shores, Noah explained. But over time, they became symbols of safe harbor, of coming home. That's what you've become for me. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Even though we're both still broken? Because we're both still broken, he corrected gently. Our cracks align in ways that make us stronger together than apart. She thought of the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, highlighting the damage rather than hiding it. Perhaps that's what they were doing, filling their fractures with something precious, creating beauty from what had been broken. That night, as they lay tangled in Noah's sheets, Elena traced the contours of his face in the moonlight. I never expected this, she whispered. To feel whole again. To find home in another person after believing mine had been destroyed. That's the thing about homes, Noah replied, pulling her closer. Sometimes you have to build a new one. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who helps you build it right. Outside, the sea continued its eternal conversation with the shore, advancing, retreating, transforming the landscape with patient persistence. Elena listened to its rhythm, so similar to the beating of Noah's heart beneath her ear, and understood that some storms don't destroy. Some storms clear the way for something stronger to emerge. June arrived in Seabrook with picture-perfect skies and a steady stream of summer visitors. Elena had settled into a rhythm that no longer felt temporary, teaching her online course from the porch of her cottage in the mornings, meeting Noah for lunch at Harbor Cafe, spending evenings either at his workshop watching him sculpt or at her place reading aloud from books they both loved. The cottage no longer felt like a hiding place but a home. She had planted herbs in window boxes, hung local artwork on the walls, and even adopted a one-eyed cat from the shelter where Noah occasionally volunteered. She named him Hemingway, which made Noah laugh every time he called for the cat. Professor Marshall? A student's voice pulled Elena from her thoughts during a virtual office hour. You seem different lately. Happier. Elena smiled, surprised by the observation but unable to deny it. I suppose I am. Later, she wrote in her journal. June 10th. Is it possible to be grateful for heartbreak? 6 months ago, I would have said absolutely not. But now I wonder if Daniel's betrayal was actually a terrible gift, forcing me out of a life that had become too small, too comfortable, too dishonest. Would I have ever found the courage to leave otherwise? Would I have ever found Noah, or Seabrook, or myself? The call came on a Tuesday. Elena was in the middle of planning her summer literature seminar when Daniel's name appeared on her phone screen. For a moment, she considered not answering. But 12 years couldn't be erased so easily. Elena. His voice was the same, confident, slightly hurried. I've been trying to reach you. I've been busy. The divorce papers. You haven't signed them. She closed her eyes. I've been meaning to. I'd like to see you, he said, the words rushing out. There are things we should discuss in person. Julia left. It's over between us. The world tilted beneath her feet. What are you saying, Daniel? I'm saying I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. And I'd like a chance to make it right. After she hung up, Elena sat motionless, staring at the wall. 3 hours later, when Noah arrived with takeout and a bottle of wine, he found her still sitting there. What's wrong? He asked, setting down the bags. Daniel called. He wants to try again. Julia left him. Noah's face went carefully blank. And what do you want? Before she could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at it, then back at her. I need to take this. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. That was a firm in Seattle. They want me to head their new eco-design division. It's everything I've been working toward. Seattle, Elena repeated. That's across the country. Yes. When would you go? They need an answer by the end of the week. I'd start next month. The silence between them was no longer comfortable. It stretched, taut and painful, filled with unasked questions. I should go, Elena finally said, gathering her things. I need to think. Noah didn't try to stop her. The lighthouse stood sentinel at the edge of Seabrook's northern point, its white tower stark against the blue June sky. Elena climbed the winding path to its base, seeking perspective in its elevated vantage point. For generations, the lighthouse had guided ships safely to harbor, warning them away from dangerous shores. Now she hoped it might offer similar guidance to her turbulent thoughts. Daniel wanted her back. After everything, the lies, the betrayal, the months of silence, he wanted to try again. Once, that would have been all she desired. She had loved him for 12 years, had built her life around their partnership, had imagined growing old in the home they created together. But that was before. Before she discovered his affair with Julia. Before she fled to Seabrook. Before Noah. Noah, who might be leaving for Seattle. Noah, who understood her pain because he had lived it from the other side. Noah, who saw beauty in broken things and had taught her to do the same. Elena sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, pulling her journal from her bag. She flipped through recent entries, tracing her evolution through ink and paper. May 15th. Noah asked me today what I miss about my old life. The question caught me off guard, not because it was intrusive, but because I had to think so hard for an answer. My career. I'm still teaching. My friends. The few true ones have stayed in touch. Daniel. The man I thought I married never actually existed. What I miss, I realized, is certainty. The illusion that I knew what my life would be. But certainty, it seems, is just another word for blindness. She turned to an earlier page. April 3rd, I dreamt of Daniel last night. Not the Daniel who betrayed me, but the one I met in graduate school, passionate about justice, full of ideals and ambition. I woke up crying, mourning not just the end of our marriage but the death of who I thought he was. Who we were together. Noah says grief isn't just about losing someone else, it's about losing the future you thought you'd have. The person you thought you'd be in that future. And then, from just last week. June 5th, Noah took me sailing today. The wind was perfect, the sea cooperative. He handles a boat with the same quiet confidence he approaches everything. Attentive, respectful of its power, working with natural forces rather than against them. The secret to sailing, he told me, isn't fighting the wind. It's understanding how to position yourself to catch it. I think that's true of life after betrayal too. We can't fight what happened. We can only adjust our sails and find a new direction. Elena closed the journal, her thoughts clearer. Daniel's call had shaken her not because she wanted him back, but because it forced her to confront how completely she had moved on. The woman who had loved Daniel, who had built her identity around being his wife, no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, more self-aware, more authentic. But Noah's potential departure raised different questions. Their relationship had blossomed in the specific context of Seabrook, this liminal space where both had come to heal. Would it survive transplantation to Seattle? Or was it, like certain coastal plants, uniquely adapted to this particular environment? More importantly, was she ready to build another life around another man? To risk her heart again so soon after its last breaking? The renovation of Seabrook's lighthouse had become a community project over the past month. Noah's designs had been approved by the Historical Society, and volunteers gathered on weekends to begin the careful restoration. Elena had joined them, painting trim and cataloging historical artifacts found during the renovation. The day after Daniel's call, she found Noah there alone, measuring windows for replacement glass. "I thought you'd be avoiding me," he said when he saw her. "I considered it," Elena admitted. "But I'm trying to break that pattern." Noah set down his tape measure. "Elena, about Seattle. Before you say anything," she interrupted, "I want you to know that I'm not going back to Daniel. That chapter of my life is closed." Relief flickered across his face. "I'm glad. But that doesn't solve the Seattle question." "No, it doesn't." She moved to stand beside him, looking up at the lighthouse tower. "This place has been guiding ships for over a century. I wonder how many lives it saved." "Hundreds, probably. That's why restoring it matters." "You see potential in broken things," Elena said softly. "It's one of the things I love about you." The word hung between them, love, spoken for the first time. "I haven't accepted the job yet," Noah said after a moment. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" "Because whatever decision I make affects you too. At least, I hope it does." Elena thought of her journal entries, of the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had come to Seabrook to disappear. Now she was considering following Noah across the country, starting yet another new chapter. "I need to know," Noah continued, "if what we have is strong enough to survive outside this bubble we've created. If it's real or just two broken people clinging to each other in the aftermath of the same storm." Elena looked out at the horizon, where sea met sky in an unbroken line. I don't have all the answers, Noah. But I know that what I feel for you isn't about Daniel or Julia or our shared past. It's about who we are now, and who we're becoming together. She took his hand, feeling the calluses that told the story of his work, his art, his rebuilding. The lighthouse doesn't just warn ships away from danger. It also guides them home. Noah's fingers tightened around hers. And where is home for you now, Elena? The question hung between them as the sun began its descent toward the waiting sea. The answer didn't come to Elena immediately. It unfurled slowly, like the tide revealing treasures on the shore, one realization at a time. That evening, she returned to her cottage and pulled out the divorce papers that had been sitting in her desk drawer for months. She signed them without hesitation, then placed them in an envelope to mail the next morning. The finality of the action brought not grief but relief, the closing of a door that had been ajar too long. Next, she opened her journal to a blank page and wrote, June 15th, I thought the storm ended when Daniel left. But maybe it ended when I stopped waiting for the sky to clear and learned to dance in the rain instead. I am not the woman who arrived in Seabrook 6 months ago. That Elena was defined by what she had lost, her marriage, her confidence, her sense of self. She came here to hide, to lick her wounds in private, to disappear. But something unexpected happened. In this place of retreat, I didn't become smaller, I expanded. I reclaimed parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I started writing again. I made friends. I fell in love not just with Noah but with the woman I am when I'm with him. Brave, authentic, whole. Daniel's betrayal broke something fundamental in me. But in that breaking, new growth became possible. Like a forest after fire, like a shore after storm. The realization crystallized with sudden clarity. She wasn't choosing between Daniel and Noah, or between her past and her future. She was choosing herself, the self she had discovered in Seabrook, the self who could love Noah not from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. With that understanding came the answer to Noah's question. Home wasn't Boston, or Seabrook, or Seattle. Home was wherever she could be this version of herself, the version who wrote poetry again, who spoke her truth, who had learned that broken didn't mean ruined. And right now, that place was with Noah. Dawn found Elena walking the path to the lighthouse, her journal tucked under her arm. The early morning light painted the world in gentle watercolors, soft pinks and golds reflecting off the calm sea. She knew Noah would be there. He often went to watch the sunrise from the lighthouse when decisions weighed heavily on him. She spotted his figure at the base of the tower, leaning against the newly restored railing, coffee mug in hand. For a moment, she simply watched him, this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and become so essential to it. You're up early, he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. I couldn't sleep. Elena moved to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching. I've been thinking about your question. About where home is for me now. Noah turned to face her, his expression guarded but hopeful. And I realized something important, she said, meeting his gaze. When I came to Seabrook, I was running away. From Daniel, from the humiliation, from the person I'd become in that marriage. I thought I needed to disappear to heal. She gestured toward the horizon, where fishing boats were heading out for the day. But that's not what happened. Instead of disappearing, I found myself. The real Elena, not Daniel's wife or the perfect professor or any of the other roles I've played. Just me. I like that Elena, Noah said softly. I like her very much. She likes you too. Elena smiled, then grew serious again. The thing is, Noah, I don't want to build my life around someone else again. Not even you. I did that with Daniel, and when he betrayed me, I had nothing left. Noah nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's fair. But, she continued, I do want to build a life alongside you. Whether that's here or in Seattle or somewhere else entirely. I want us to create something together, as equals, each bringing our whole selves to it. She pulled her journal from under her arm and opened it to the page she'd written the night before. I don't need you to complete me. I'm already complete. But I choose to share my completeness with you, if you'll share yours with me. Noah took the journal, reading her words carefully. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with emotion. I've been offered other jobs before, you know. Good ones, in Boston and New York. I turned them down because I wasn't ready to leave this place where I'd found some peace. And now I realize that peace isn't about location. It's about being true to yourself and surrounding yourself with people who see and value that truth. He handed the journal back to her. I'm going to turn down Seattle. Elena's eyes widened. Noah, no, that's your dream job. I just said I'd go with you. It was a dream job, he corrected. But dreams change. I have a new one now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to her. Elena opened it to find a sketch, architectural plans for a building she didn't recognize. What is this? The old harbormaster's building by the boardwalk. It's been empty for years, but the town council is accepting proposals for its use. Noah's eyes lit with excitement. I was thinking, a bookstore. With a small cafe. A place for readings, for community, for stories. Elena stared at the plans, then at Noah. A bookstore. You mentioned once that you dreamed of opening one someday. And I've been wanting to create a space that combines my design work with something meaningful to the community. He hesitated. I'm calling it Chapter 2. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she looked back at the sketch. She could see it clearly. Shelves of books bathed in natural light, comfortable chairs where readers could lose themselves for hours, a small cafe serving coffee and pastries, perhaps a corner for local artists to display their work. Chapter 2, she repeated softly. What do you think? Noah asked, a rare vulnerability in his voice. Would you want to build this with me? Not just the business, but a life here. Elena looked up at the lighthouse, then out at the sea, then back to the man beside her, the man who had taught her that even wreckage deserves a second life. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. 1 year later. The bell above the door jingled as Elena flipped the sign from closed to open. Morning light streamed through the windows of Chapter 2, illuminating shelves of books and the small cafe area where Noah was arranging freshly baked scones. The bookstore cafe had become a beloved fixture in Seabrook over the past 6 months. Locals gathered for coffee and conversation, tourists browsed the carefully curated collection, and twice a month, Elena hosted readings featuring regional authors. On the wall behind the register hung a driftwood sculpture, 2 intertwined forms supporting each other, and beneath it, a small wooden sign that read, Every wreckage deserves a second life. Elena moved to stand beside Noah, leaning into him as they surveyed their creation. Happy? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. More than I thought possible, she replied honestly. They weren't perfect. They still had moments of doubt, of fear. Elena still kept her journal, and Noah still sometimes needed the solitude of his workshop. But they were no longer grieving alone. That afternoon, as summer visitors browsed the shelves, Elena noticed a woman hesitating by the poetry section. Something in her demeanor, the careful composure, the shadow behind her eyes, reminded Elena of herself a year ago. Can I help you find something? She asked gently. The woman looked up, startled. I'm just browsing. My husband and we're separating. Reading helps. Elena nodded, understanding completely. I have something that might speak to you. She selected a volume of Mary Oliver poems, opening to a marked page. This one saved me once. As the woman began to read, Elena glanced across the store to where Noah was helping a young father find books for his children. Their eyes met briefly, a world of understanding passing between them. Outside, the lighthouse stood against the summer sky, its beam no longer needed in the daylight but still there, a reminder that even in the darkest night, there was always a way home. Do you believe that sometimes betrayal can lead us to where we truly belong? That our greatest heartbreaks can guide us toward our deepest joys? Share your story in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys of love, loss, and redemption that remind us all, it's never too late for a chapter 2. Elena Marshall arrived in Seabrook as a fractured version of herself, a woman defined by betrayal, seeking only to escape her pain. Noah Whitaker had already been there for months, quietly rebuilding himself from similar wreckage. Neither was looking for love. Neither believed they were capable of trusting again. Yet in their shared brokenness, they found an unexpected path to healing. Their story isn't a fairy tale about love conquering all. It's a more nuanced truth, that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest teachers. When Daniel's affair shattered Elena's world, she lost not just her marriage but her sense of self. Who was she if not the supportive wife, the woman who had built her life around her husband's ambitions? This identity crisis, painful as it was, forced her to rediscover parts of herself that had been submerged during her marriage. Her passion for writing poetry, her desire to connect with a community, her dream of owning a bookstore. Similarly, Noah's experience with Julia's infidelity compelled him to re-evaluate his priorities. He left a prestigious architectural career to pursue work that felt meaningful, restoring historic buildings, volunteering with conservation efforts, creating art from discarded materials. His driftwood sculptures became both therapy and metaphor, physical manifestations of his belief that broken things could be transformed into something beautiful. Their journey teaches us that healing isn't about erasing our scars but incorporating them into a new self-narrative. Elena didn't get over Daniel's betrayal. She integrated that experience into her understanding of herself and her capacity for resilience. Noah didn't pretend his marriage to Julia never happened. He acknowledged how that relationship, even in its failure, shaped his values and priorities. The driftwood metaphor runs throughout their story, offering profound insight into human resilience. Like the pieces Noah collects from the shore, we are all shaped by forces beyond our control, storms that batter us, currents that carry us to unexpected shores. The damage becomes part of our story, our unique grain and texture. But damage doesn't determine our worth or limit our potential for beauty. The cracks are part of the story, Noah tells Elena while showing her his workshop. This philosophy, reminiscent of the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold to highlight rather than hide the damage, becomes central to their healing. They learn to value their broken places, to see how those very fractures allow light to enter in new ways. Their relationship succeeds not because they help each other forget the past, but because they create a safe space to remember it honestly. They don't promise to heal each other, an impossible burden that dooms many relationships, but instead commit to supporting each other through individual healing journeys. They understand that true intimacy requires authenticity, and authenticity requires acknowledging both our light and our shadows. Perhaps most importantly, Elena and Noah demonstrate that betrayal, while devastating, need not be defining. Daniel and Julia's affair connected them in pain, but their choice to build something meaningful from that connection was entirely their own. They refused to let betrayal have the final word in their story. The lighthouse serves as another powerful symbol throughout their journey, a structure designed to guide ships safely through dangerous waters. Like the lighthouse, painful experiences can ultimately serve as beacons, illuminating paths we might otherwise never have discovered. Elena would never have found Seabrook, her authentic self, or Noah without the devastating catalyst of Daniel's betrayal. What initially seemed like the end of her story became merely the end of a chapter. Chapter 2, the name of their bookstore, encapsulates this central message, that our lives are not single narratives but collections of chapters. A painful ending can precede the most beautiful beginning. The book doesn't end with heartbreak, it continues, page after page, with new characters, new settings, new possibilities. This doesn't romanticize betrayal or suffering. Elena and Noah would never claim their pain was worth it or necessary. But they did learn that resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were before trauma. It's about growing into someone new, someone who carries the lessons of that experience into a more authentic future. Their story reminds us that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to integrate those experiences into our ongoing narrative. That sometimes the most beautiful lives are built not on perfect foundations but on carefully tended wreckage. That every broken piece deserves a second life, not despite its damage, but with its damage honored as an essential part of its unique beauty. In the end, the same betrayal, isn't really about betrayal at all. It's about reclamation. It's about two people who refused to let pain have the final word, who instead used that pain as the raw material from which to craft lives of greater authenticity, deeper connection, and unexpected joy. Has betrayal ever led you to where you truly belonged? Have you found strength in your broken places or beauty in what once seemed like wreckage? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If stories of resilience, second chances, and unexpected love speak to your heart, subscribe to Love Enchanted for more journeys that remind us it's never too late to turn the page and begin a new chapter. Click that notification bell so you never miss a moment of healing, hope, and the kind of love that builds something beautiful from life's broken pieces. Until our next story together, remember, sometimes the most meaningful connections are forged in the very fires meant to destroy us.